Alright, so from our last section, we managed to do pagination for the data that we are looking at. And for today, I want us to see how we can be able to combine in regard to the foreign data to do with the different entities. And one of the things that you realize is that we have the film data having reference to language information. So in so doing, we want to, whenever we we return the data for this particular JSON, we want to be able to also return the language information, that is the original language ID. Instead of returning the actual fields, we are going to return also the names of the languages. So in this, in so doing, we'll be able to manage the operations of having the film coming with the additional information to do with the language. And in that case, we're just going to pick the language name alone and we attach it to the film. And in this case, because the R2DBC connection doesn't usually have a mechanism of knowing the relationships between two different entities. So to just get started, we are just going to modify a little bit on our film service implementation. And already we had the language repository created. So what you're going to do is actually combine the language information to this particular film query that we make. And then from there, we'll be able to make use of that to do the mapping. And before we get started, we are going to make use of the ZipWith method. And this particular ZipWith method has different implementation. And before we go too further, I'm going just to quickly open this particular ZipWith. And then you can be able to see there are other additionals of a tuple. We are going to get a tuple. So I'm going just to look for tuple here. And this particular tuple is going to be of a nice thing to do. Let me just quickly look for it. And in this case, you're going to have tuple against a mono. So at this point, we are going to introduce another function to query the languages, all the languages, and then collect them into a list. And then at the same time, we are going to combine zip with the count. So what I'm going to do after this particular zip with, so that means we have the first mono, which has the mono for list of films. Then we have the mono for count. We are going to introduce another zip. So we're going to zip with an additional mono, which is going to be the language repository dot find all dot collect to list. So we're going to do that, and that will be able to give us the third tuple. And in this case, we are going to now do flat map to be able to have that particular operation. So instead of us now using map, we are going to do flat map. So flat map. Alright, so once you have that, then now our flat map implementation is going to be multi-line. So I'm going to remove this one, and then we are going to just have something like that. Now, on this particular case, we are going to develop the actual application logic in terms of mapping the language ID to the film, in that we already have those languages in this case, and each film has the language ID. We'll be making use of the language ID to set the actual film information. And to do that first, we need to introduce a transient field, which is going to be at the film data, and this one is going to be able to contain two different fields. We are going to introduce two different fields in regards to the languages. So we are going to have the language ID, and then the two fields here. So we are going to have this one is going to be string, and then language name, which is the initial one. And then we are going to also have another one, which is going to be able to give us the original language name. So in this case, we are going just to introduce an additional field, original language name, and the language name, which is the default for the language, and then the original of the particular language that we are looking at. Then this one are not going to be database fields, so we are going to mark them as transient, meaning that they are not considered in any of the operations to do with the database. So we mark them as transient, and then from there we'll be able to set these two fields whenever we are looking at them. So once you have those two fields, what you're going to do is now get the actual list of the film which we had already collected here. So this one is going to be list of film that we are looking at. Is going to be film tuple, also film info, film list. Then this ones we are going to get it from T, and this T is going to make use of the first mono. The first mono is giving us this one, so it's going to be get T1, which should be able to give us the tuple for the films. So in this case, we are going to do get T1, right? And then once we get T1, this one gives us a tuple. And then for us to get the actual list from that tuple, we are going to also again call get T1, which will be able to give us now the actual list. That is the list that we are going to look at. Then the next thing that we are going to do for us to combine that data, let me first import this one. It's going to be getting the second data. So this one is going to be the page size, total count of pages. So we are going to have long total count is going to be equal to t dot get T1. This should be get T1 again, then dot get T2, which will be able to give us the long value of the count. So once we have that, then we are going to get the actual list of languages. So in this case, we are going to have list of language, and in this case we are going to say languages is equal to t dot get T2. In this case, we are going to get the list of languages. So that will be able to give us the list of languages. So once we have all this information, then now we need to build our page according to this particular information. And to do that, we are going to look for each particular field in this list. We are going to set the two fields. So to do that one quickly, we are going to say for each film, and this particular is going to be for each film f in. So we're going to remove this one. So for each film in the actual film list. Alright, so once you have that, what you're going to do is search for the language ID that we have for that. So you're going to look through the languages. So for each language, it is going to be language object, and this is going to be language in the languages object. That then we need to do a conditional check of the film against the language. So what you're going to do, if condition, you're going to do this one simply as saying by if film dot get language ID, then dot equals. Alright, so you're going to check against the equality of the language dot ID, language ID. Alright, so once you have this language dot get language ID, if they are the same, then what you're going to do is you're going to make use of this language object to set the film information. So we are going to say film dot set language name. So I'm going to just first start with the first field. So language name is going to be film dot set language name is going to be equal to language dot get name. That way. So you'll be able to see that now we have already set this field. So we can actually make use of one single field instead of two. So we're going to make use of just the language name. to have our implementation. So once we have that, it means that now we have taken each particular film and we have already set the original, the actual language for that particular film. Now, once that is done, we are into break for this particular inner loop. So once we have that much, then we are going to make a break condition here, just to close off instead of us continuing to loop through the languages. So that means for each particular film, we have looped through the language and we have checked the language ID against the film language ID. And then we set that, and if we don't find, then we just, if we are able to find that, then we just break instead of going to the entire loop. So that is the looping that we are going to introduce for this particular setting of this particular additional information. Now the next thing that you need to do is now to create the page object. Previously we had created that particular page object as a new implementation. So we are going to modify this one to be our page, and this particular page is going to contain film, and then this is going to be our page. And then we have all the information. We are going to make use of new page implementation. Page implementation. We need the list of films, so we are going to pick all the film lists. Alright. Then from there we have the total count and the actual page request, which is coming from the argument. And then from there we are going to supply the total count. So you can see nothing has changed apart from the introduction of the looping, and at the same time we are introducing a zip with another mono which contains now the language repository. Then once this is done, what you're going to do is just say return mono.just the page. So you're going to just create this particular page object, and that will be able to mark our final implementation of adding new information from two different repositories. So you just need to make use of the zip, and this will be able to combine the results from one mono to another, and they give you a tuple, and now a tuple with another tuple, another mono, then it gives you the T2. So as you can see, for this one, total count was under get T1 because that's the first tuple that we had. Then once you have that particular tuple, then we combine it with another tuple object, but then now this is the third one. Right? So that is how we quickly combine this data and we achieve that. So the next thing that you're going to do is just to quickly restart our application and confirm that all this data is actually coming with the additional field of the language name. So quickly, let me give it a try. So I'm going to run this. Now once it's up, we'll be able to do the test. Yeah, as our application is started, so we just need to invoke this particular send request again, and that will be able to give us the information for the language name that we intended to have for each particular film in this case. So that is the end of it all in regards to our application, in regards to reactive. Then now the task to you guys is to learn more about reactive framework and how it can be combined. But then I've already shown you how you can be able to combine different data if you want to aggregate it to one particular entity which is being returned. You make use of the ZipWith, and then you can make use of flat map to transform that particular mono into a different mono. So whatever data that we get here, then we are transforming it into a page object. All right, that is how you can be able to transform different data types into a different return type. So that's it all. Remember to subscribe and share the video for many to learn the same concept. Thank you.